Well, Russia and Belarus have rehearsed the launch of Russian tactical nuclear weapons as part of joint war games. Russian President Vladimir Putin, who attended the drills, claimed some 100,000 troops took part in the manoeuvres, though that figure is thought to be much lower in reality. US military officials were invited to observe the exercises, along with observers from other countries. And I'm joined now by William Courtney. He's an adjunct senior fellow at the RAND think tank and a former US ambassador to Kazakhstan and Georgia, as well as a US-Soviet nuclear testing commission. Mr. Ambassador, President Putin attended the Zapad 2025 drills and claimed 100,000 troops were involved. How credible is that figure, do you think?
Anthony, that's probably a credible figure. In 2021, the last time this Zapad exercise took place, there were 200,000 troops involved, and that was meant to intimidate and coerce Ukraine. Several months later, of course, the Russians launched full-scale invasion of Ukraine. 100,000 is probably meant now, especially to intimidate Poland and the Baltics, as well as the recent drones, 19 drones that Russia launched toward Poland the other day. So it's pretty clear that Poland is one of the primary targets.
You talk about intimidation. If all of this was, to some extent, theatre designed to send a message, what message is Putin trying to send?
That the West should back off supporting Ukraine, that the West should encourage President Zelensky to cut a deal with Russia on terms that would be favorable to Russia.
Belarus confirmed that Russian tactical nuclear weapons were part of the exercises. How significant is that inclusion?
Since 2018, President Putin has been really with propaganda bombast talking about nuclear capabilities that Russia has and designing some new capabilities. And then a year or so ago, Russia allegedly moved some tactical nuclear weapons, those are smaller nuclear weapons, into Belarus. Because Russia's conventional non-nuclear military forces have performed relatively poorly in Ukraine, they've suffered huge losses, both personnel and equipment, and gained very little territory recently. So Russia, once again, seems to be using nuclear as another way to try to scare the West in Ukraine, but it hasn't worked in the past. It will not work now.
Yeah, that said, we've seen that NATO does large exercises of its own. What's the difference then between what NATO does when they're doing exercises and what Russia's doing now?
Russia, and before that the Soviet Union, took advantage of large-scale exercises, not only for defensive activity, but especially concentrated on what it called counteroffensive. But in fact, that was an offensive operation. So in the Soviet period, those exercises would begin with, in the West, with Poland, for example, and some of the other East European countries, Warsaw Pact allies, being at the front of the Soviet invasion of Europe. NATO exercises are defensive. They are not focused on offensive operations the way Russia's are. And NATO exercises also have a larger participation by other NATO allies. So it's an opportunity for all the allies to work together.
Before we go, let's talk a little bit about Belarus here. It's no longer just a staging ground in this case. It's hosting Russian nuclear weapons and playing, it seems, a central role in these drills. How concerned should NATO be by their direct involvement here?
NATO probably should not be so concerned about Belarus with nuclear weapons, because, in fact, Belarus will have no control over those weapons. Those will be Russian weapons. What is really interesting about Belarus is that in 2020, after a rigged election in Belarus, there were large-scale public protests in Belarus. 1-2 million people participated in those protests. This came as a shock to the Kremlin. It may have had something to do with why the Kremlin decided to launch the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The Kremlin is worried that if Ukraine goes west, Belarus will follow. So right now, part of the purpose of this exercise is not only to intimidate Poland and Baltics, but also to intimidate Belarusian independent civil society that Russia will do whatever it takes to maintain control of Belarus. And I think the Kremlin is quite worried that more protests could break out.
William Courtney, it's been great to get your insights, Senior Fellow at the RAND think tank. Thanks so much for your time.
You're quite welcome, Anthony.